Welcome back to the Liberty Perspective. I'm Joe Marshall. Today I got a show where I want to kind of get into renewables, wind, solar, and the scam, that they are. We've got out there is we've got in the contemporary politics of things, in the right-left dichotomy and the Republican-Democrat dichotomy, if that even exists anymore when it comes to renewables, is this whole denier versus the swizzlers, the Kool-Aid swizzlers. That's how I look at it. You can tell how much Kool-Aid. None of these people are up there on involved with this from the central planning aspect of things that aren't wearing a Kool-Aid smile ear to ear. You know what I mean? It just doesn't happen. But beyond the name calling, the schoolyard name calling shit, there's some real nefarities to get to. There's some real threats to our republic, real threats to our individual rights and liberty that are secured in our limited constitution. How the world socialism of these things the world socialism is intricate to these. It's been integrated into the whole renewable wind energy climate change narrative. And the climate change narrative, the anthropogenic global warming narrative, doesn't exist without its world collectivism cure. The world collectivism of DEIESG, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, human rights-based redistributive justice, right? It's all right straight out of world collectivist doctrine, revolutionary postmodern collectivist doctrine. And, a lot of the justification for renewable energies, the justification for it, even if it's scientific justification for it or whatever, there is none. There can be no evidence found for any of it outside collectivist doctrine, outside revolutionary postmodern collectivist doctrine, including the academics and the academia that is the vanguard aspect of the world socialist revolution. Find me anywhere. I haven't seen it yet, and I've done a lot of digging. It's just something to take into consideration. Where is the evidence for this 90 plus whatever % consensus that the scientists have? Where is the evidence for the anthropogenic climate change and the world collectivist cure of sustainable development, which was also came out of the United Nations in the 1987 Brundtland Report? So you can't point to that because it's collectivist doctrine. Anyways, just a little something to put out there for your consideration. I'd like to get right into this. I got some stuff that's probably going to be a couple shows. The caveat I want to get into, or just something right off the bat. I don't know what it is, allergies or whatever, but my eyes are still running. So, sorry. It's got to happen. I still got to go on and get this. I want to try and get this stuff out to you. It's been a minute already, going 10 days or almost going on 2 weeks since I posted my last show on the anarchist postmodern First Amendment auditors that are going after our law enforcement. Not just law enforcement, all government, because as an anarchist, they don't recognize any law because they don't recognize any government, which means that they don't recognize the Constitution that ordains the government and the constitutionalism of law. But it's the same shit here. It's all the same show. It's all the same collectivism that is involved with that deconstruction of our republic, as it is with climate change, as it was with COVID and the centralization of the COVID protocol and the centralization of medicine, One Health. It's all the same collectivism. It's all the same malevolent show, as Dr. Cooey says. But anyways, I want to try to get into this here because I got a lot to get down to here. Let's see if we got this. Yeah. As I go down through this, I already did a couple shows. You know, we've got this Agricola wind farm. It's a company called Liberty Renewables. This is a local thing that's happening in my area here in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region, and you know, New York State's stepping all over everybody. A couple years ago, they passed laws. The governor and legislature passed laws to, I think it was a legislature involved, but anyways, they passed some kind of law or something, or whether it was a direct order from the governor, I don't know, you know, directive. But anyways, they made it so local opposition has basically been stepped on. They stepped on all local opposition. The counties don't have any say. The towns don't have any say. The villages don't have any say. In these rural areas where they want to implement all these, where they're shitting all over, you know, the whole of upstate New York with a whole bunch of freaking, you know, solar panel fields. They're all over the freaking place. Now they want to start putting up these colossal windmills. They're like, I don't know, 700 feet, just under 700 feet tall. About in the neighborhood of twice as high as the Statue of Liberty. They're colossal. They want to put these things all over, and they can't even connect them to the grid yet. I mean, they've got a 7. I'm going to go down through this. There's a lot of nefarities with this that I want to take a look into how they're backlogged. A lot of these solar panel projects that are out there, they're being built for a while, and the renewables, they're waiting in backlogged years, if not pretty much a decade in some instances, waiting for their turn to connect to the grid. And I'm going to be going over some of this stuff and some of the other bullshit that's involved with these things that a lot of us, that even I mean, but none of us, I wasn't anyway, when I first started digging into this. I mean, maybe you all are all up to date on this freaking shit and what's really going on with this stuff way more than I am, and that's okay. I mean, I'm just getting the time to really dive into this. I've done it before, and this is kind of what I want to do before. I've kind of dove into this a little bit and connected what we're dealing with to the greater revolutionary collectivism, the world socialist collectivist revolution at large. I've done that before. I did it with this show here. I said, you know, the content of the bullshit science of global warming, CO2 is an earth-baking greenhouse gas, okay? And the world socialism feigned to be the cure that I've already shown to be the bullshit that it is in, I've already done this in 2 previous shows, so what I'm doing is kind of, you know, building on what I've already done. This is one of the shows here that I did. You can go there and check that out. This is a picture of how in greenhouse gas, you know, some of the greenhouse gas, well, if the earth was a greenhouse, in order just to get the plants growing in the level of carbon dioxide that we have in our atmosphere now, isn't enough to really grow plants in a greenhouse. So they have to put these, you know, greenhouse, in these carbon dioxide making machines, they're putting them in greenhouses to raise the level of CO2 so that the plants can thrive. I mean, there's a certain level upon which plants, a certain level of carbon dioxide upon which plants will cease to be able to exist, because plants use the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. Biology 101, I don't know, reality 101. We exhale carbon dioxide. Plants of the earth may utilize carbon dioxide to make the oxygen that all living creatures on earth need to breathe and exist. So how has that become a pollutant? It doesn't compute. But anyways, I also you know, that, and the other thing too is I want to kind of show you here is, let me see if I can I get that over just a little bit for you? Yeah, maybe. But anyways, there's this chart that I got into Patrick more in these videos. I want to show you what those videos that I did so that you can go back and get brushed up on where I'm coming from if you're not really getting, or if this interests you, or if you're not really getting where I'm coming from on a couple things. You can go back and check those out and get a broader based foundation of where I'm coming from on some of this shit, I guess. But one of the bigger things is, just to get going, we got to understand these things in the context of the kind of where we are with the whole carbon emissions shit. You know, the whole carbon emissions argument and global warming argument to begin with are kind of, I don't know, like I said at the beginning, you're not going to find evidence for it anywhere outside collectivist doctrine. But anyways, they've got this. They go back. One of the ways that they can go back and test the oxygen levels and the carbon dioxide levels and the gas levels of the atmosphere or whatever in these glacial ice cores, they can go back thousands of years, even millions of years, I guess, to the point with other geological ways that they can test gases, whether they're in rocks, minerals, or whatever they do to get that they mine. I don't know how they do it, but they're geological sources, okay, for these gas levels in our atmosphere. Now, this chart really quick kind of shows you where we're in the context of what we're dealing with here. This is 570 million years. It says millions of years before. This again came from Patrick Moore, the freaking Swizzlers, the freaking advocates for green energy, the science of consensus, the centralized narrative. Hates this guy. I don't agree with everything he says, because he actually goes to the distance to say that the carbon emissions that were actually that the anthropogenic CO2 and global warming is what's saving the earth. So I ain't going there. But this chart, in the history of the data that they've gotten, what it does is it goes back 570 million years, and it shows the level. This green line here, let me see. Let me see what I can do here. Sorry. There it is. See, the gray is CO2. Okay? This is CO2, the gray. The green is temperature. So they're trying to show a temperature. They're saying that there's a temperature correlation with the rise of CO2. But over the past 570 million years, you can see that here's an ice age, here's an ice age, this is an ice age, and then this is basically an ice age down to here. So, and we're technically still in an ice age. I shit you not. We're technically still in an ice age. And even Noah agrees with that. So if we're still in an ice age, if we're still coming out of an ice age, that means we're still in an ice age. And if we're still coming out of that ice age, wouldn't the temperatures be warming? So it's like with the population pyramid. They saw the baby boom coming, so why not utilize that to murder a bunch of people? And who knows what they're, and utilize that to captivate people and imprison people in a mindset that makes them compliance to a central narrative. And that's what happened with COVID, as Dr. Jonathan Cooey has shown over and over and over again, and Mark Kulak at Housatonic has shown over and over and over again. The data is there that this happened. It's not an opinion. It's just, we'll show you the data, and you can make up your own mind. When they have the population pyramid and you've got an exponential percentage of the population that's over 65 in life at or over life expectancy, you're going to have an increased number of people that are dying. And you can utilize that exponential increase in people at or above life expectancy that are dying and say that it's COVID and say that it's some kind of pandemic that you need to lock everybody down for, and then the central planners got to choose who was and who wasn't essential or who was non-essential to society. That's crazy. It happened. This is the same shit. It's the same shit. So you've got this the correlation. It shows you that there is no correlation to the correlation that they say is actually that's there. Over a longer history, it's not. So you've got this carbon dioxide level. 570 million years ago, it was way up here. In parts per million. Does it say parts per million? I don't know. It's up here to 6,000, but down here, just a few thousand years ago, it crashed. It started crashing. 146 million years ago, it started crashing right there. It's on steadily downbeat, while temperatures were still way up here, right? But down just within the past, few thousand years or whatever, we've got this curve, and then this little tiny upshoot right here in temperature that they say is global warming, and this little tiny upshoot right here that they say is the increase in carbon dioxide that we need to cure for with renewable energy and windmills and solar panels that there's no market for. It's just being mandated out of central planning, But I want you to get that chart so that you can see the context of which everything that we're going to be going over to is. It's kind of bullshit. All that carbon dioxide way down, just that little uptick, that little hockey stick, I guess that's what it is, right? Is that the hockey stick? Then you got, that's what we're looking at, That's what we're looking at. Yeah, I guess it was right there. I didn't see that. But anyways, here's a video of Patrick Moore explaining that. You can go here, and he'll explain that a little bit.
Dr. Patrick Moore has served as chair of the CO2 Coalition and has been a leader in the international environmental field for over 40 years.
Went back up again. Biological systems, there were 3.5 more billion years before that, or 3 billion years where there was life before that. But if you'll notice, for example, the first little oval red thing, that's the Silurian Ice Age. There was an ice age when CO2 was at approximately 5,000 ppm, more than 10 times what it is today. Then the next one, the Karoo Ice Age, in the Carboniferous period, coincided with a drop in CO2, but the Carboniferous period was when forests formed. And this resulted in at least an order of magnitude more carbon in biological systems. When the forests grew, before that, everything was flat on the ground or in the ocean. And when forests grew, they sucked a huge amount of carbon out of the atmosphere. Now, why that CO2 depletion continued is too long a story for here, but I think it had to do with the fact that there was no enzyme that could digest lignin created, where CO2 and temperature were totally out of sync with each other. When CO2 goes up, temperature comes down. When temperature goes up, CO2 comes down. And CO2 has been coming down now steadily for 150 million years. There's a reason for that. And if you look at the very tail end, on the right-hand side, that little uptick is all we have done. We have not done more than that, but we have at least done that, which has ended the constant downward trend in CO2 in the global atmosphere.
Now, that's where he kind of gets into saying that, well, thank God for human-caused global warming, right? And CO2 emissions increase. I don't know. But anyways, like I said, I don't agree with everything he says, but the data is there, and the data is open for interpretation, and I guess. But that's the data. Another show that I did, giant windmills, solar farms, mark the degree to which we have been captured. I kind of tie the whole ESG, DEI, ESG, the world socialism of those things into how these solar panels and windmills and everything that you're seeing across the land, how they represent the degree to which we have been captured by world collectivism, how we have been captured by the collectivist revolution against our republic, against our individual rights and liberty, against our limited form of government. You know, and I tie that in there. So you can check that out. But, you know, this whole thing about an ice age, right? We're still in an ice age. We're technically still coming out of an ice age. So, historically we're still in, but coming out of an ice age. It's going to be getting warmer, whether we're forced into a centralized world socialism or not. But yet the world socialism is a cure the same way the lockdown was a cure for the anticipated rise in population. This is the world socialism anticipation of the rise of temperature. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's what I'm seeing. See it. So for further confirmation on this whole thing about the ice age, right? That the anticipated rise in temperatures, it's happening. There's a group out there called Climate Realism. There's a video. They put out a video once a week. I think it's the Heartland Institute is involved with it. Another group that the Swizzlers freaking hate, but the advocates for renewables really despise, but and they dirt them every chance they can. But they put out a show every week called of Climate Realism is the name of their show, where they kind of go over the data on what's been going on, what's been in the news as far as global warming, anthropogenic climate change, renewable energy, and that kind of thing. So I you know, they're a little dry, but I think I like them. I like what they're doing. I like the information that they're getting out there for people to consider. And you can find them on Rumble, I guess, probably BitChute. I don't know. I know that at least on Rumble you can find them. On YouTube, maybe, if YouTube doesn't shut them down or demonetize them or whatever. But, you know, they kind of go over a lot of this shit too. So they're an interesting opportunity if you're interested in getting some information that, you know, is at least pushing back against the central narrative that hasn't already been co-opted, maybe, or hasn't totally been co-opted by a group of people pushing back on it that's kind of, you know, limited spectrum of debate where they're it's a captured resistance, you know. They're doing pretty good. But against that ice age thing, for further information, I got this on the conversation, and the conversation is not a conservative or, you know, anti collectivist organization whatsoever. And they got on here, how many ice ages has the earth had, and could humans live through one? And then you got down here, we've known that the earth has had at least 5 major ice ages. So we've come, just like that chart we were just looking at from Moore, right? That data shows we've had multiple ice ages over hundreds of millions of years or whatever. And it's going to happen again and again and again. An anticipated rise and fall of temperatures could be utilized against a population that might not be aware or even made ignorant through intention of these things that are happening. Sort of like back in the days when the tribal peoples would and witch doctors or people would use the eclipse of the moon to trick the people into whatever they wanted them to do, right? But now we know these things we know that it's anticipated. We know they're coming. They can even schedule them years out, right? Here's one from the American Museum. When and how did the ice age end? Could another one start? You know, geologists answer the question. It says, I'd like your question to address. I like how your question addresses both the post and future ice ages. It turns out that we are most likely in an ice age now. So, in fact, the last ice age hasn't ended yet. That's the American Museum of Natural History. I shit you not. Okay? That's that article right there. Scientists call this ice age the Pleistocene ice age. That has been going on since about 2.5 million years ago. So the past 2.5 million years we've been in an ice age that we're still in, but coming out of. Okay? And some think that it's actually part of an even larger ice age that started as many as 40 million years ago. Okay? Even Noah doesn't disagree. Okay? Climate.gov. What's the coldest the Earth has ever been? The most significant ice age in the last 500 million years may be the most recent. Okay? So ice ages aren't experiencing any global warming. It's the ice ages are getting colder. When I was in high school, actually, this is kind of... When I was in high school, I just went to my 45th reunion this year. They were telling us in science class that we were headed for an ice age. We were headed into another ice age. That the ice age that we were in was going to get colder and colder. That's what they were teaching us, as science, as the consensus of science. You know, but the consensus changes according to who has the controls of the funding and what you're going to get funding for, right? But anyways, it says striking during the time period known as the Pleistocene epoch, this ice age started about 2.6 million years ago and lasted until roughly 11,000 years ago. Like all others, the most recent ice age brought a series of glacial advances and retreats. In fact, we are technically still in an ice age. Unquote from Noah right there. I shit you not. Crazy, right? Crazy. Isn't it going to be getting warmer if we're coming out of an ice age? The anticipated rise in the temperature that they knew was coming, that they know is coming. Do you see what I'm saying? It's all the same strands of the same web coming round and round again. And as Cooley says, it's all the same malevolent show. It's all the same malevolent world collectivism. You know, it is. This is one of the things that I've been trying to show people. It's all the same. It's all the same collectivism. You know, without collectivism, you can't have the centralized science. You can't have the centralized medicine. You can't have the centralized law enforcement. You can't have the centralization of anything without collectivism. Whatever degree or color shade of that collectivism that you have. But anyways, before I get into going a little bit farther here, what I wanted to do is we went to we got, like I was talking before, we got this local windmill thing here. They got 24 700 foot or approximately 700 feet, like 680 I think, with the windmills are at its height, tall. They're giant. And yeah, so we've got people that are trying to push back against us, try to slow this down. They had a meeting. The judges that, you know, these judges they're all appointed out of the Supreme Court by Kathy, or the governor, who is now Kathy Hochul. They're Supreme Court justices that are appointed to a certain panel of judges, and they get, like, I don't know, an extra $30,000 a year or some shit extra, almost just under $20,000 a year. So for almost like $90,000 over a 5-year period that they have, as long as they, you know, allow for governor policies to go through, I guess. But anyways, it's up to this panel of judges on whether this project goes forward or not, whether there's local opposition or not. The locals have no say because the New York State government just squashed somehow with some kind of legal action. It's not constitutional, but it's legal. Isn't there an amendment in the Constitution, I'm not sure right now which one it is, that guarantees the people a Republican form of government? Pretty sure there is. I just don't have it right here which one it is. Well, hang on a second. Yeah, let's take a look at this thing, right? Let's see if we can come up with a little bit off track here on this. This is probably going to be a couple shows with this, just so you know. I'm not going to get this, what I have all done in this. But, I'm not sure which amendment it is that you can look it up. Let me just check something out here. Let me see what I come up with. Maybe it's not a Article 4, Section 4, the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a Republican form of government, and shall protect each of them against invasion and on application of the legislature or of the executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. But the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government. So the United States could step in here and say, listen, these laws that are stepping on local opposition is stepping on the republic, which the United States, per the Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, guarantees to the people. Will they be held to strict scrutiny, or is it just another rational basis test because we're looking at things from a human rights perspective, from the world collectivism and world socialism of a human rights perspective? I don't know. Just a question. Just to go, when I get into deeper this a little bit, the opposition, they did, these group of judges that I was just talking about, they had a meeting, and they said, well, you can come and talk, and you can have a comment or whatever, and the decision's basically been made, but they're gonna pretend that they're listening to us, I guess, and let everybody come and talk. But they've never had more than 30 people at any of these meetings, from what I understand, show up at any of these. Well, they had 60 people. 60 people show up. Local people showed up. Those four, I counted four people. 4 people that were pro these windmills that are going up. It's called the Agricola Wind Project, Liberty Renewables. It's right here in the Finger Lakes. You can look at Agricola Wind Project if you want to look that up. But 4 people out of 60 speakers, and one of them was, I don't know, a crackhead. That was about the only thing I could think of. And then she said she came there for the free pizza, and she called everybody there NIMBYs, which is not in my backyard. I guess it's a derogatory term from the Swizzlers that they call everybody NIMBYs. Not in my backyard shit, right? Well, come on, you got to take it for the team, man. It's your social responsibility, man. Come on, right? The earth is going to boil, man, because of this carbon dioxide in the air. But anyways, I was the 4th speaker on that. I was the 4th person to sign up. I had no idea. I thought maybe I might be the only one. I had no idea. And maybe a lot of those people that were there thought they were going to be the only one, because it wasn't really organized. I mean, there was a group of people, a couple groups of people that were there that have been trying to push out information on these things. I just, but I wanted to at least be able to go there and air some kind of, let them know that I wasn't okay with it. I had a 3-minute speech. Now I want to read this, what I read to you, what my 3-minute speech was, just so that Sorry about that. So that we know where we are and where we're coming from on this already. And I got all these, these links here all back up or all sourced. All these numbers are sourced. And I said, since 2010, NYSERDA programs have been focused on creating public-private partnerships to increase private investment in renewable energy, to which a 2013 report released by the New York State Comptroller's Office reminds us in no way, quote, alters the fact that the entity's cost of public infrastructure, the entire cost of the public infrastructure will always be borne by the public, whether it's a private investment or not. So you can just stop running that bullshit by us, is what I was saying. At a cost far greater than just money spent, like compounding inflation, the loss of property rights, and our very republic. The compounding inflation. When I go down through these numbers on here, when I'm going down through the numbers in the billions and trillions of dollars that are being spent on this, in an act of the futility of trying to cause a green grid and trying to create a green grid that's never going to be able to produce the energy that the same progressivism that's pushing these green grids is demanding energy that they'll never be able to take when they're pushing AI and everything else to centrally plan everything in society and our life. They're going to need that data. They're going to need all that data and to keep all that data in line so they can utilize it to centrally plan society and every aspect of our daily life. They're going to have AI to do it. All right? But anyways, that's what I was getting at. And the spending, the money, the exponentially compounding inflation in perpetuity, because for every dollar that they spend, they're spending us into oblivion. It goes right back to the Keynesian economics of the New Deal, John Maynard Keynes. Oh yeah, well, when you go into debt, just spend more money, man. Just spend more money, because and then when you go deeper and deeper into debt, just spend more money. And then since that time, the dollar has lost 99 point something percent of its value, and will continue to crash. And then, in a lot of ways, as I've showed in other shows that I've done before, that system was designed to crash that system. Our monetary system was designed to crash our property system. John Maynard Keynes was a world socialist, and all you have to do is read Friedrich Hayek's Road to Serfdom, and read down through that and show how, as Hayek, defends to a large degree free enterprise in a free society and individual rights and liberty and freedom in our limited form of government. John Maynard Keynes is the opposite. He's a world socialist. The book New Deal that the New Deal was written for was written by Stuart Chase, Fabian socialist. It's all there for us to even see it. But a lot of these renewable policies, they're bragging how they're basically derivatives of New Deal legislation too. Yeah, it all ties in together. It's all the same shit. But anyways, NYSERDA's New York Green Bank, itself a public-private partnership, claiming it's committed over $2.5 billion to the green objective since 2013 to avoid. It says the same carbon dioxide plants need to create the oxygen we and every other creature on Earth need to breathe. Yes, as I said before, right? Additionally, a Forrester report, this one, regarding the expense of what they termed, quote, seeding the green market revolution, unquote, has shown that between, quote, 2010 and 2023, solar and wind received the most federal subsidies of $76 billion to $65 billion, and $76 billion and $65 billion, respectively. Since 2015, federal investments into countering the captured social sciences of anthropogenic climate change via forced compliance to the world socialism of redistributive, human rights-based DEI, ESG, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and the global governance they all codify, which they do, have increased some 21-fold, while studies continue showing renewable goals is unobtainable, be it by 2030 or 2050. Right there. And that's Baylor University. They're not an anti-renewable. They're drinking the Kool-Aid. That comes from Swizzlers saying that shit. But anyways, the Inflation Reduction Act alone is set to cost us yet another $1.2 trillion, triple the original projection within just the next few years. Cato puts it at $1.8 trillion. Either that number will come up again, and when I go down through what I'm going through, either way, it becomes clear to even the most indoctrinated, maybe, right? As the Institute for Energy Research puts it, quote, wind and solar only exist because government subsidies and mandates, unquote. Right? They're wholly dictated. They have no free market value. You know, where a free people voting with their dollars get to determine the need and value of things. Translated into English, every single one of these industrial wind and solar sites are being forced upon us with or without our approval, at the expense of not only us but our children and grandchildren for generations to come, according to the needs of central planning technocrats at the helm of these state, federal, and yes, global public-private partnerships, including Liberty Renewables, which is a derivative of or a front group for the global colossal renewable giant of Copenhagen out of Denmark. Global public-private partnerships. That one, Mussolini himself defined and operated as fascism. And I keep trying to point this out. All the lefties that are for all these renewables, I mean, communists and fascists have always hated each other. National socialists and communists have always hated each other. Anarchists and fascists have always hated each other. But they're all pushing for renewables. And what I'm trying to say, and what I've been trying to say, here's another instance documenting that it's all the same freaking collectivism. Because you've got the Mussolini himself called this corporatism, this public-private partnership shit. He operated it and defined it as fascism. But maybe Mussolini doesn't know what fascism is, right? But you try to tell all these people that they're all these lefties, all these anarchists, whether they're communists, humanists, it doesn't matter. They're all for this fascism. I'm telling you. They're being hornswoggled too, you know. I don't know. But that one, Mussolini himself defined and operated as fascism. I'm going to get more into how these renewables are. Basically, they can't exist without forming public-private partnerships. Can't happen. Two, have herein been shown are in no small part thanks to New York State, Cuomo and Hochul administrations in particular, right? They actually have a policy to form these things. Policies to form this public-private partnership fascism. From a truth and liberty perspective, these windmills represent nothing more or less than the colossal revolutionary collectivist knives in the back of our republic that they actually are. And they shouldn't be allowed to go through. That was where I was coming from when I said my speech. Part of it actually made the news. I guess I was on the news for one sentence of it, you know, but I don't know. You know, but that's a local issue, but that's the local pushback on a giant, colossal, not just national, but global freaking collectivist revolution. I mean, Europe and 99% of the rest of the world besides the United States is so far gone on this, they can't see any way out. I don't even think it can comprehend or compute what actual individual rights and liberty are, what actual free enterprise is, because it's been redefined so many times in collectivist terms, getting lost and stuck in the abyss of the dialectal, if you will, you know, which is also collectivist interpretation on what the Enlightenment era was. The whole Enlightenment era, which is the we'll get into this. There's a woman that Mark Kulak has introduced, the part of the centralization of the COVID scam and everything, and the COVID protocol, and her name is Melissa Chen, and she did a speech a few years ago where she was talking about the Enlightenment and how we need to save the Enlightenment and blah 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 blah. But she gets things all screwed up. From the Enlightenment, from a collectivist perspective, is wholly opposite than what the Enlightenment is from the perspective of what our founding fathers and founding principles would have it. So, and I just want to point these things out. And I'm going to be doing a show on that. I'm going to maybe do a study hall on that speech that she did, just to kind of show and put it out there how all these different things tie together, and how that academia and these academics are instrumental in sabotaging the right against the left, and sabotaging conservatism against liberalism, and sabotaging any pushback whatsoever against the revolution that's targeted our republic, our limited form of government, our constitutional republic, and our individual rights and liberty for destruction. And maybe we'll get into that. But anyways, let me see what we got here. Okay. I'd like to continue to expose more aspects of the same bullshit for your consideration as it pertains to the centralized global governance bullshit of the same mandated renewables, and the full out revolutionary postmodern assault on the whole of it represents against our Constitution and Republic and the whole of our individual rights and liberty, like I just said. I write these things down here because, I don't know. Child of the 70s, I'll never remember what I wanted to say, so I kind of have to put rails down for me myself. Yeah, I don't have the grand finale fireworks of a lot of guys, and I just have to kind of give myself a boost so I can get this information out to you without getting lost in a tangent somewhere. But anyways, even with the rail, I still get lost on the tangent, but you're going to have to deal with it. But anyways, they got this wind and solar at odds with growth. So right off the top, I want to get into show you some evidence that's come against the wind and solar narrative. Some of these places like this Mackinac Center, they're supposed to be a free enterprise, pro-free enterprise think tank or whatever, but I don't know to the degree to which they maintain any kind of integrity to that mission, or they mix in any kind of progressivism that they say is pro-free market. I don't know, because I haven't looked into them themselves. But where there is a quote-unquote right-wing or denier source, I'll let you know. But a lot, if not most of the sources that I have here are actually from the pro-renewable, pro-green New Deal shit sources. It's crazy. It's crazy. They put it out there themselves, how much bullshit their own narrative is, They let me see if I can get that. I like to keep that lantern showing because that's the liberty, man. Like I said in the first couple of shows that I did, those lanterns were signs on the Underground Railroad for safe haven for slaves escaping slavery in the South. This whole area right here was part of the Underground Railroad. The old farmhouse on the old farm that my grandfather had and my dad had, not too far from here. The house has been torn down, it's gone, but it was part of the Underground Railroad. And a lot of these older houses around here were part of the Underground Railroad. They had safe rooms for the slaves to hide in, secret stairways and stuff like that. And they would put these lanterns like that right out there for people to see, and it was kind of a sign. And those little figurines, little black figurines, holding the lantern and stuff that everybody says are racist. Yeah, they were used to let people know there was safe havens for black people during the days of Harriet Tubman and the other people that were running the Underground Railroad. Actually, Harriet Tubman's house isn't too far from here. One of the houses that she lived in towards the end of her life is in Auburn, New York, which isn't too far from here either. Kind of a historic area around here, and that. So I like to keep that lantern showing. That's what I am, the liberty perspective, trying to defend liberty and our founding principles from the bullshit, But anyways, this McNamara State Wind and Solar Center, Mackinac Center, out of Michigan. Wind and solar are at odds with growth. This came out in January 2025. Most America and Canada are at elevated risk of blackouts and power outages in the next 5 to 10 years, according to North American Electricity Reliability Corporation's 10-year outlook report. The report, which was released last month, highlights the inadequacy of wind and solar to replace traditional energy generation like coal. This is why I'm doing this. There's arguments against this push for renewables that are just common sense. From our founding principles perspective, from a free society perspective, from an individual rights and liberty perspective, but that's not always. They don't. It doesn't. Our liberty and our republic are no longer has a voice in contemporary republics and in contemporary politics, or on the right or the left. So this is one of the reasons why I started this show, and one of the things I'm going to try and do with some of these things is maybe put some of this stuff out there for your consideration. Is that whatever you've got, whatever information that you have, that to utilize in pushing back against all these solar panels and windmills that they're shitting all over our countrysides. Not just in New York, it's all over the country, all over the world. It's not, but it's manifested itself in my neighborhood. So I'm just kind of using this as an example. That is a gateway into, it's all the same show for everybody. The 2024 long-term reliability assessment addresses the key problem for the grid. We plan to increase electricity demand while relying on energy sources that are wholly inadequate. Correct. The key driver of increased demand is the progressive green push to electrify everything. The key driver of increased demand is the progressive green push to electrify everything. Well, you compound that with the freaking how much energy the AI is going to consume. Projections are out there, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, and I've even heard as much as 100-fold over the next decades. It's crazy. Plans to build super surveillance data centers. I put super surveillance in there. Plans to build data centers and create infrastructures needed for rollouts of artificial intelligence in numerous industries will also require far more electricity than is currently available, as exemplified by the Trump administration's own AI action plan. Trump rolled out an AI action plan that will increase. This is right here. White House unveils America's AI action plan. It's not just the left. It's not just the Democrats. Just putting it out there for your consideration. Meanwhile, there's not enough supply to meet the growing demand. According to projections by the major grid operator in the Midwest, the amount of dependable capacity in the grid in 2041 will be less than what we have now. That's crazy. This is a direct result of closing reliable energy-dense coal plants. From California to Germany to the United Kingdom, the net zero energy transition has repeatedly raised prices while enriching solar and wind developers and allowing progressive policymakers to pretend that they are solving a problem that didn't really exist, as far as the anthropogenic global warming, as far as the need for decarbonization of our atmosphere. Right? I don't know. But anyways, allowing progressive policymakers on the right and the left, by the way, Democrat and Republican, by the way, to pretend they're solving a problem that doesn't really exist. And they're raising prices while enriching the solar and wind developers. Now, you can take that as an argument against capitalism, or you can take that as an argument of in favor of the public-private partnership fascism that has actually targeted the actual capitalism of free enterprise for destruction. The same free enterprise capitalism that a free society needs to have to remain free, being the fundamental exchange of property owned for property desired in a free market, where the people get to vote with their own dollars on the need and value of things, right? Just saying. Think about it. But not all these, they're not necessarily pro individual liberty, even if they say they're pro free market. But I just want to put that clarification in there, okay? Yeah. So outside revolutionary collectivist doctrine in academia, it doesn't exist outside revolutionary collectivist doctrine in academia. That's what I was saying earlier. There's no evidence for any of this global warming shit outside revolutionary collectivist doctrine. I haven't found it yet. It's an epiphany. I've never heard anybody else pose the challenge. Where's the evidence for it outside revolutionary collectivist doctrine? I've never seen none. And don't give me the science that's centralized. Just read the body of the white papers. You'll be able to tell, because they're all drinking the Kool-Aid. They're saying how the global warming is. We need decarbonization. Even if they're arguing against an aspect of it, they say, well, this document or this paper doesn't dispute the fact that there's this, that, or the other thing. They got to keep the funding rolling and keep pushing the narrative, even if they're within a limited spectrum of debate that would be allowable within the greater push for renewables, the greater push for the narrative of global warming, you know. I'm not sure the degree integrity to which these people in that McNamara Center hold themselves to the principles of our founding individual rights and liberty and republic, but the progressives, on the left at least, do not like the Mackinac Center. And I gave you an article from Progress Michigan that pushes back against the legitimacy of that organization. I'm not, I just want to kind of put that out there. There's a interconnection backlog. One of the big things that they have out there that's kind of a scam with these things is that a lot of these solar panels and windmill places and projects and everything, they're sitting there for, months, years, just sitting there unplugged from the grid because they can't be plugged to the grid. So they're just sitting there. They only have a life expectancy of 15, 20 years, maybe 25 in some cases. But if they're spending the first 5 or 10 years waiting in line to get on the grid, how does that eat into their life expectancy? How many years are they going to be, actually producing power into the grid? I mean, has that been factored into their worthlessness? I don't know. Agricola Wind interconnection request with ID 1148. This is Liberty Renewables for the local project. The request that they put in to be hooked to the grid. Page not found. Come on, I was just on this. But anyways, Agricola, when they connected to the grid, they put their Q. They pronounce this Q, just like QAnon, but this is Qing off, I guess. They pronounce that QUE Q, I think. I'm not sure. They filed for their connection onto the grid back in 2021. Do you think that was already pre-approved? You think that they're, they give a shit about local resistance when most of us around here didn't even find out that this was going on until like maybe a year ago, in 2024 or 2023, a year or two ago? Crazy, right? Well, the CIP, which is Regarding this Liberty Renewables, I put in here, CIP acquires 1.3 gigawatt of New York onshore wind projects, which is the Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners made the acquisition through one of their funds, which has raised billions in capital investments for greenfield renewable energy projects. These guys are out of Denmark, or their Danish investments firm Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners announced Monday that it has completed its acquisition of Liberty Renewables, which is the one putting these freaking windmills up in central New York. I think they got a couple other projects too in New York. I don't know. They put it out there. I think there's only like 12 people that work for that. I went over that in one of them videos that I already did on this. I said they had like 12 people. Like, oh, the local Liberty Renewables is going to be putting this on. Bullshit. It's bullshit. There ain't nobody local going to get any major part of that work. And I go over reasons why, and it's going to be hard. Because they got, and just really quick, what they got to do, all these DEI, ESG mandates, the human rights-based, redistributive human rights-based, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and all the global governance that it codifies into everything. They're putting mandates. NYSERDA is putting, which is the New York State where all the funding, the agency that all the funding for all this shit comes from. They're putting all this stuff out there, and they're mandating all these DEI, ESG shit, redistributive justice on everything. And it's all socialism. It's all Marxism. And not only are they mandating it for the contractors that get the job, they're mandating that the contractors that get the job as a prime contractor or subcontractors, or subcontractors, on and so forth. They're mandating that all these contractors push these DEI, ESG mandates upstream. They call it upstream into their whole distribution, their whole supply chain. Whoever they're doing business with, whether they have to. Well, if you're going to do business with us on these projects, then you have to be compliant and bend the knee and kiss the ring to the world socialism of DEI, ESG, and United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I shit you not. I show it in that other show that I did. It's crazy. But so this is where we're coming from here. A little dive into this. With an average waiting time for the surge in renewables to be connected to the grid exponentially increasing up to a decade or more, and the latest data showing that the average wait for the new connection in the New York State region to be 7.5 years if everything goes according to plan. At best, the average is. Best average case scenario puts Liberty Renewables, the fake local front group of Denmark's global renewable giant, Copenhagen Infrastructure, like I just said. 24 frickin' windmills sitting idly by or spinning for nothing until sometime between 2029 and 2031, if not longer. Now, you can say, a lot of the people out there, you can say, well, they got these clusters now. They're approving clusters. Yeah, I'm going to be getting into that shit, too. I'll get into that a little bit later. But anyways, another article here. Wind and solar power generators wait in years-long line to put clean electricity on the grid, then face huge interconnection fees they can't afford. See, to put clean electricity on the grid, this isn't anti. These aren't NIMBYs. These aren't deniers. CNBC right here. CNBC, that's the article. Key points. To connect to a new source to a power grid in the U.S., electric grid requires energy generators to go through an application process with a regional transmission authority utility, blah, 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 blah. The interconnection queue backlog is a symptom of a larger climate problem for the United States. There are not enough transmission lines to support the transition from a fossil fuel-based electric system to a decarbonized energy grid. Yeah. Our grid, as it has been, perfectly capable of supplying us pretty steady energy in growing amounts up until this point, is wholly incompatible with renewables for a multitude of reasons. One of the main ones is that renewables, sun and solar in particular, are intermittent. Is the best thing, the nicest thing you can say about them. They're inefficient, converting anywhere from only 15% or more, 15 to 20% or somewhere in that area, maybe 30% in some cases of the wind or solar sunshine into energy, and that's when the sun's shining. Not counting when it's not counting all the subsidy from fossil fuel or nuclear that it needs to back it up, not counting the batteries and everything else that you need to store the energy that they can store, so when it's not producing, that it can produce. It's colossal. It's colossal. No businessman in their right mind would take their own money and try to make this shit happen. A lot of businessmen will get in line for government money to make it happen. Unscrupulous businessmen, people who don't have any morals or principles other than to make money on pushing the narrative of the need for a socialization of projects so companies don't profit. Companies are profiting. Public-private partnership companies are profiting. That's who the only people are that are profiting, because they're not exposed to actual real market forces. The government has protected them inside a bubble, mandating that everybody purchase their products. It's like Mussolini said, it's fascism. But yeah, so there's not enough transmission lines to support the transmission from a fossil fuel electric system to a decarbonized energy grid. In late 2017, Ochete-Sakowin Power Authority paid $2.5 billion deposit to secure a place in line for its application to be reviewed by Southwestern Power Pool, a regional grid operator. Ochete-Sakowin is 7 council fires of the Lakota Nation, I believe. Is it Lakota? Yankton, Dakota, and Lakota. But that's Sakowin, Ochete-Sakowin, 7 council fires. It represents the Sioux Nation, the Lakota people. They have their own power grid, and they got sucked into this shit too. They're getting getting their ass handed to them too by all this, Sadly, they drink a lot of the Kool-Aid, but then they get their ass handed to them too, The thing is that Americans and Indian people across American people, from the perspective of our founding principles, from the perspective of our founding republic, in limited form of government, the American government has broken its treaty with the American people, as well as with the American Indian people. I'm just putting that out there for consideration because it's the truth. But anyways, yeah. So 5 years later, in 2022, Southwestern Power Pool came back and told them that the fee to connect to the grid would actually be $48 million. Yeah. Let me see where that were. Yeah. So Ochete-Sakowin was told that they needed to pay $2.5 million to get in. Then in 2022, 5 years later, they were told that they still weren't connected to the grid. 5 years later, they were told in 2022 that it was actually going to cost them $48 million. Ain't that some shit? That's because connecting all the new power to the grid would require major updates to the transmission infrastructure. Ocheti-Sakowin Power Authority had 15 business days to come up with the freaking extra $45.5 million. Where do you think they're going to get that? I mean, the Lakotas don't have casinos like the Ho-Chunk, the Winnebagos, They just don't. Or the other ones in the eastern seaboard, They got a pole barn somewhere in the middle of a almost desert-looking place for their casinos. Needless to say, we couldn't do that and had to drop out. Now the Ocheti-Sakowin Power Authority is reevaluating the size and composition of the project and plans to re-enter the interconnection queue by the end of the year. That would mean another year-long wait in line. A year-long wait in line? These burdens are typical? That's not. That's from CNBC. Just saying. In 2020, Pinegate Renewables had a solar project located in the Piedmont region of North Carolina that it expected to cost $5 million to connect to the grid. The local authority in charge of overseeing the interconnection process told Pinegate that it would be more than $30 million. Pinegate had to terminate the project because it couldn't afford the new fees. You see where I'm going? Exponentially more money, exponentially more money, exponentially more money. The exponential, how many more times? And all this money that keeps coming is being raised. They're just going to turn to the government and get more funding, or they're going to drop out, and the government's going to have to raise the amount of money that they're going to have to put out in funding for somebody else to do it. Exponentially increasing money, and they're spending money. They're spending your money. They're spending taxpayers' money. They're not even spending taxpayers' money because the taxpayers can't conceivably pay for this in countless generations. That's how much money they're spending. They're literally creating the money out of thin air. And the only thing that's doing is destroying our ability to be able to provide for ourselves because it's destroying our dollar. And once we don't have a recognized source of currency that we can exchange as some kind of representative of property owned for property desired exchange in a free market, they're undermining our republic. They're undermining our Constitution, our limited form of government, and our ability to even have a free society. Or the prospect of a free society. They're undermining it. Every dollar that they spend, every dollar that they're spending, that they're monetizing out of thin air, eats away at the dollar in every American's paycheck and every American's pocket. It's destroying since COVID. Well, it's been going on since the New Deal, but exponentially noticeable since COVID, right? But anyways. Here's some more of them carbon dioxide. I'll be right back. I'm back. Sorry, I thought Minnie P wanted to come up. But anyways, back to where we were. Yeah, that's that article from CBN. We're going over here. It said, waiting in line. The entire electric grid in the U.S. has installed capacity of 1,250 gigawatts. There are currently 2,020 gigawatts of capacity in the interconnection queue lines around the country, according to a report published Thursday by the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. The total power capacity that comes out of a fossil fuel burning power plant is often much greater than the capacity from a renewable plant. Right. And therefore, interconnections request to get the same units of energy online. So, there as this whole renewable energy net zero shit, right? Zero emission shit is as they're pushing this agenda. They're taking fossil fuel plants offline. And I'm going to get into this some more. I got some more information on this that breaks this down so that you can see the basics of it. But for every regular plant that they take down, you're going to have a multitude of solar projects, a multitude of windmill projects, and it gets crazy. You're talking millions of solar panels, or up to hundreds, if not thousands, of windmills to replace a single fossil fuel coal gas burning plant or a typical nuclear power plant. I shit you not. It's crazy. So now you've got all these projects that are waiting to get hooked to the grid. You take one generator off grid, and that one connection that they had now has to be replaced by a multitude of connections. And you see them all over the place. They got these solar panel freaking projects out in the middle of 40 acres of them, 20, 30 acres of them, whatever, out in the middle of a field somewhere, way down off the road, and you see two or three or four telephone poles off the freaking wires, and then they just stop. The wires just stop because they're not connected. It's crazy. A single natural gas plant could be 1,200 megawatts. That's one request. 1,200 megawatts. Whereas usually if you're going to get the same amount of capacity with renewables, that's going to be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different projects, so that 10 different requests in the queue. Yeah, 10. I would probably more than that. On average, it took a new power generation 35 months to go from the interconnection request being filed with a grid operator to an interconnection agreement being reached in 2022. It was in 2022, according to the Berkeley lab, right? In energy markets, the grid connection backlog grows by 30% in 2023. It grew another 30% from 2022. Dominated by requests for solar, wind, and energy storage, because, like I said, you can't just have renewable power going onto the grid because, shit, they only freaking windmills only make power when the wind's blowing, and as long as it's not blowing too much. Wind or sun only makes power with the sun shining. Right? And this is from these energy markets and policy from the Berkeley lab. Okay, this is from the Berkeley lab in 2024, the article. The backlog of new power generation and energy storage seeking transmission connections across the U.S. grew again in 2023. Nearly 2,600 gigawatts of generation and storage capacity now actively seek grid interconnections, according to the new research from the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, the Berkeley Lab. Active capacity in U.S. interconnection queues increased nearly eightfold over the last decade, and is now more than twice the total installed capacity of the existing U.S. power plant fleet. From Climate Law. This is from Columbia Law School. Okay, again, not an not from a denier. Use your Swizzlers. Swizzlers. Yeah. But anyways, New York is anticipating rapid growth of demand for electricity over the next few decades. Sorry about the uhs. Importantly, load growth, a relatively new phenomenon in New York from 2002 to 2016. Demand for electricity grew by less than 2% in total. Last summer, however, New York's independent system operator, NYISO, estimated that load will increase by 90% by 2042. While there are several causes of load growth, efforts to electrify the transportation and building sectors are significant contributors. As we say, they're electrifying everything. In New York State, they've made gas. They're in the process of. They haven't already done so, making gas stoves illegal. They don't want anything gas. They want anything propane. They want everything electrical, and they want everything on smart meters where they can monitor your electric use on everything at every minute of the day in real time. That's what it is. That's what a smart meter is and does. There are concerns that New York's existing energy infrastructure regulatory framework may not be prepared to bring new sources of electricity online fast enough to meet the growing demand. Increasing interconnection costs. The past 5 years, interconnection costs for community-scale solar projects have risen precipitously. One of the panelists estimated that in some instances, the costs have increased by a factor of 5 times. The lack of affordable localized interconnection for community-scale solar projects is requiring substation upgrades of up to $20 million. More spending. The distribution lines, which developers must pay for upfront before being allowed to build their projects. Another panelist estimated that over the last 5 years, costs of interconnecting utility-scale projects have increased by an average of $30 million to $45 million, doubling or tripling in cost. Yeah, and the way these contractors have been bidding these contracts in New York State anyway, New York State will put it out there. So you're going to bid this project, and then you're going to provide this electricity at this rate. Whatever rate, you got to bid the rate that you're going to provide electricity, and you're locked into that for I don't know how many years. But they can't even get online because inflation rates have been so high that they're pulling out and backing out of these agreements. Or trying to renegotiate these agreements because the inflation rates has gone so high because they're spending so much freaking money that they're spending so much money that the inflation rates are just exponentially increasing. The dollar's just become more and more and more and more worthless. And they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit. They don't give a shit. You know, as long as you're shaking the money tree, who cares, right? Who cares? All the government's going to guarantee that you're going to be taken care of and that you'll be profitable as a public-private partner. Exempt from market forces. The cure, a doubling down on the renewable targets with more state control of everything. And I shit you not here. That's what I'm saying. The same article continues recommending regulating the costs of distributing upgrades. They want to regulate the cost of everything, so they want fixed markets. They want the government to just regulate everything. To eliminate uncertainty about the costs of distribution upgrades and avoid imposing retroactive costs on developers, the state could take a more assertive role in regulating the cost of distribution upgrades. One of the panelists, Noah Ginsburg, advocated for the Accelerate Solar for Affordable Power bill introduced in March 2025, which he argued would advance reforms to reduce interconnection costs. The bill would also amend for environmental conservation law to raise the distributed solar target from 10 gigawatts by 2030 to 20 gigawatts by 2035. So each project has to be bigger. They're not going to have these little projects anymore. They're going to be huge. They're going to double them in size. The bill remains in the Senate Finance Committee as of this writing. And I don't know what it's done since then. This writing was July 2025, just a month ago. Yeah. Okay, from Envirus. Envirus or Envirus, I don't know how they say it. Unveiling an ISO dynamic in the market for trends for 2025. This is the independent, I don't know, like New York State ISO. This is whatever ISO. But the interesting thing here is that this source, Blackstone, has recently announced that it's acquiring this company that put this article out. I don't know. Blackstone, right? Go figure, right? That's that article. Overloaded queues continue to stall projects, and this is one of the pushbacks that I'm saying is that these windmills, in short, these windmills are going up. How long are they going to sit there till they can even be plugged in? These solar panels that are shitting all over our countryside, how long before they're even plugged in? Now they got this big push for nuclear because they know New York State's all of a sudden, Hochul's out there freaking pushing nuclear. All of a sudden, it's a green source. It's a decarbon source. Which brings up like a lot of questions on nuclear waste and whether they're going to start recycling nuclear waste or not, or what the hell are they doing, right? I don't know. But if they're going to be going to nuclear, then at once all these solar and wind projects become antiquated. At once they're for nothing. They're moot. There's no need for them. For one, they can't supply the energy that they're going to be needing over square miles of territory. Shitting all over our countryside, over square miles of territory. They're no way going to be able to produce the energy needed that they're going to be demanding, that the progressives left and right are going to be needing for their centralization of everything with AI alone, not to mention the electrification of everything else. Ain't going to happen. So they're going to go to nuclear. So if they're going to go to nuclear, why have any of these freaking projects? Because you don't need them. You don't need them. The only thing that they need these solar and wind projects for, they're just boot prints. It's literally fascist boot prints walking all over our countryside by the left. Being left by the left. The political left is the one leaving these freaking fascist, public-private partnership fascist boot prints all over our countryside, on our farmland. There's no need for it other than to say, we got our boot on you. And we want to leave our boot print on you. There's no need for them if they're going to go to nuclear. That's just something else I'd like to throw out there for your consideration. It doesn't make any sense from any perspective other than these companies and their public-private partnership partners in government. A shit ton of money, short-term shit ton of money. Who cares if they work? It doesn't freaking matter if they shit all over everybody. We just want the contracts. We want the money. We got billions, if not trillions, we can make off it, man. You know? And we'll just leave them solar panels and windmills up there, let them rot, because we don't need them anymore, but they'll still be here. So can we stop them before they're actually any more of them are put up? Has anybody come? Can we get anybody to come to their senses, you know? I don't know. Yeah. The overlooked queues continue to stall projects. Generous tax credits from the Inflation Reduction Act and the EPA's updates to 40 EPA updates, anyways, which mandate additional coal retirements. They're mandating additional coal and fossil fuel retirements, have significantly boosted demand for renewable energy projects across the United States. The surge in investment and development has overwhelmed interconnection queues with a record number of projects seeking grid connections. This has exceeded grid operators' processing capacity, causing significant delays and project suspensions. There's a problem. There is an issue with the interconnections. I mean, I didn't realize until within the past few weeks that these solar panels that are going up can't even get connected to the grid. I didn't realize it. I just became aware of it. Does that make me stupid? Or is it just that they're not putting this information out there for people to even be aware of? I had to dig for this shit. I'm just putting it out there for your consideration. This is what I'm trying to do. I don't know. It's crazy. Low success rates have prompted policy interventions, to streamline interconnection queues. But delays and suspensions persist due to regulatory hurdles, permitting delays and supply chain disruptions. A recent intelligence research report found that the New York State Independent Service Organization, whatever that is, and the SPP and PJM and all these electrical areas have higher suspension rates later in the project life cycle with interconnection agreement suspension rates ranging from 46 to 79%. 46 to 79% of the interconnection agreements are being suspended. Higher suspension rates compared to the 20% in these other organizations here. Projects in these markets show minimal improvement in completion probability until reaching construction. So once they reach the actual construction, they actually break ground on these. The percentage of these things that actually reach connection is goes up a little, I guess. But 46 to 79% of the projects don't make it. Average time in these queues for this this area here. Let me see if I can show you something. I don't know. Maybe there's a map somewhere, but the average queue times. This is New York right here. 7.5 years we're waiting. In this area here, this CAISO organization area is 9.2 years on average. It's a decade. That's a freaking decade, man. 7.5 years here. New York, there's only one area higher than New York. You got PJM. I know that's down there. Goes from Pennsylvania over to Ohio, I think, down to Washington, D.C. But you got all these areas. The average wait, I mean, the shortest wait is, average wait is right about 4 years. Envirus Intelligence Research analyzed projects that became operational in 2022 through 2024. Compounding delays across several stages were the main driver. Compounding delays across several stages were the main driver of CAISO's higher than average projected development timelines, which averaged close to 9.2 years for all project types. 9.2 years. Right? And there's this one, ISO. Okay. ISO had the shortest development timeline, averaging nearly 3.8 years to reach operation, followed closely by ERCOT at about 4.5 years. New York area, the SPP, PJM, and ISON have more suspensions later in the project life cycle, with interconnection agreement suspension rates ranging from 46 to 79%. Again, they put that statistic in there, compared to around 20% for the rest. Consequently, projects in these markets show minimal improvement in completion probability until reaching construction. EIR, which is this environmental intelligence research where this article comes from, EIR expects only a fraction of capacity in the interconnection queues to reach operation. Based on our gradient boosting machine learning model, which is AI, right? We predict that only 10% of projects will successfully come online in the next 3 years. 10% of the projects will come online. Only 10% of the projects will be coming online. In this article, as of 2025, we predict that only 10% of the projects will successfully come online in the next 3 years. 90% of the projects are suspended or withdrawn from the interconnection queue. I mean, so you got all these, what are these windmills, solar panels that are all going up now. Even if they get to the construction stage, who's to say they're ever going to get connected before the company backs out, goes bankrupt, or just pulls out, takes the money and run? Only 10% of the projects will successfully come online in the next 3 years. 90% of the projects are suspended or withdrawn from the interconnection queue. From New York State area analyst insights, okay? Solar demand remains the largest planned energy source, while offshore wind contracts and bidding rights remain volatile, with several projects being canceled or in limbo. That's just in New York. Extreme backlog of projects in the queue has led to a new and improved cluster study process that hopes to expedite project paths through the queue. The New York State area says that the most substantial enhancements to its interconnection process in 2 decades. It says it's the most successful enhancements. The cluster, instead of taking all these different things, I guess they're going to start approving them in clusters. I don't know. Keep in mind that such past fast-track improvements have made little to no difference. And we're going to get into that too. I'm going to get into a little bit more on that. I have a little bit more information on this, the realities of how much improvement these cluster approvals are actually going to make in clearing up the backlog in the interconnection queues. Time and queue analysis of the 110 solar, wind, and energy storage projects active in the traditional New York State ISO queue. The average current wait time is 6.53 years. Okay. Of the 5 projects that became operational in 2024, 5 projects became operational in 2024 from the queue. The average time from the first interconnection request to operation was 7.5 years. Note the waiting time has increased, not decreased, an additional year, cluster approval or not. Policy updates. On August 1st, 2024, the NYSO, New York State ISO, commenced with a new transitional cluster study. It didn't stop them from increasing the interconnection weight by a year. Planned lines. Oh, here's the thing. One of the things, one of the delays is that a lot of these queue requests, they're demanding upgrades. They can't plug into the to connect to the grid without mandated upgrades. A multitude of different reasons that they want upgrades, whether it's smart grid upgrades or storage, battery storage upgrades, because wind and solar don't make energy only when it's windy and sunny, as long as it's not too windy and too sunny, probably. I don't know. But they've got to do upgrades to the grid. They've got to put grids in where they don't exist. They got to put connections in where they don't exist. And they've had several different projects. They had one project called the Clean Path New York, was a 175-mile, $11 billion renewable energy project that was set to link 3,800 megawatts of wind and solar power sourced from more than 20 new renewable generation facilities in upstate New York. Geez, does that count the Agricola Wind Project or not, I wonder? It has been officially canceled as of December 2024, citing rising construction costs and the lack of renewable generation in upstate New York. The lack of renewable generation? Well, they got so much renewable generation projects coming online that they can't possibly put them all, they can't connect them all. But the construction costs are exponentially increasing because all these increased construction costs are causing the government to put out more funding and more grants and public funding, which is creating the inflation that's causing the exponential increase in these projects that these companies are now folding on because they can't keep their bids are being outpaced. The profitability of their bids is being outpaced or undermined by the inflation that their projects are causing. And nobody sees that. Nobody can see that. I don't know. And regarding the supposed grid cluster cure, okay, New York State has announced new innovations to cure the grid backlog in the form of cluster approvals. Yeah. Advocates for the fascism of green economy have apparently convoluted any coherent pushback against the cluster narrative by locals pushing back against wind projects in particular as being futile due to the problem being a mostly solar issue, and that wind's favored status among investors will get it so that wind projects like this Agricola wind project is going to get pushed through no matter what if we try and use that argument. This is what I'm hearing. But anyways, don't fall for it, is what I'm trying to say. Is don't fall for that argument, as a couple things should be noted. One, that solar may make up most of the failures to connect, most of the backlog in the connections, only because there are far more solar than wind projects. Solar makes up a whopping 40% of all power projects waiting to be connected in this area, or any area, I don't know what area, but they make up 40%. It's been shown. And I'm going to get to that here. However, even with fewer numbers, wind projects on average still have the longest wait times, and that's what I'm getting at. So this wind project in particular, if there's a backlog, it's mostly solar. Well, it's mostly solar because there's more solar than wind, but that doesn't mean that wind is going to be pushed through faster because it's a favorite thing, because if it was, windmills wouldn't still have the longest wait time. But anyways, I'm going to be getting to that down here. I got a table in this next article. Map the age of energy projects and interconnection queues by state. The age of energy projects and interconnection queues by state. This is coming from this article right here. Decarbonization, visual capitalist. I don't know. But they've got these areas. This is that article right here. U.S. Energy projects projects in interconnection queue by state. By the end of 2023, more than 11,000 energy projects were in interconnection queues in the United States, waiting for the green light from regional grid operators to proceed with construction. This map, sponsored by the National Public Utilities Council, maps out the average age of active energy projects interconnection queues by state using data from the Berkeley lab. Average queue duration by product type at the end of 2023, more than 95% of the generation capacity in active interconnection queues was for emission-free resources. Emission-free. The table below shows a breakdown. Typical project, average queue duration, the weight line, okay, number of projects in the queue. So here we have solar, it represents 4,506 projects. Average weight is 34 months. Wind only has 841 projects, comparatively less than solar, right? But their wait time is 40 months. They have the longest wait time of wind and battery. They wait longer than solar and battery, and they wait longer than just the batteries, and they got to have the batteries because they're intermittent. Can't do it without the batteries. So you can't count just the cost of the solar panel and the solar. The cost, if you're going to say the cost of producing that energy is cheaper if you're just at the solar panel in the field or at the windmill in the field, and you're not going to count all the batteries that you need to have and all the subsidies that's going to take. You know what I mean? And it goes on and on and on once you start thinking of that. Wind projects had the highest wait times at the end of 2023 with an average age of 40 months, 3.33 years. Solar projects, on the other hand, make up more than 40% of the projects in the queue. Overall, reducing the time that these renewable energy projects spend in the queues can accelerate the transition to a low-carbon energy future. So this is a pro. This information is coming from a pro-renewable energy source. You know, you got to dig for it. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, enhancing data transparency, streamlining approval process, promoting economic efficiency, and maintaining a reliable grid are some of the ways this growing backlog can be mitigated. Note clusters aren't even mentioned. Just putting that out there. Okay, I just said that, I had a couple of things that should be noted here. One that was solar may make up most of the failures to connect only because they represent there's more solar panel projects than windmill projects. 2, even if those so-called cluster approvals do momentarily succeed in shortening wait times, they're up against a projected logjam, a long-term, foreseeably projected, and that has been projected logjam in the queue requests as renewable project contractors scramble to beat the subsidy and tax credit phase-outs inherent to Trump's big, beautiful bill. Just saying. This comes from Chicago Sustainability Dialogue. Again, coming from the Swizzlers, not the NIMBYs, not the deniers, right? How the interconnection queue backlog is slowing energy growth. So we're going to need more money and more funding. We come on. The interconnection queue was already too long to manage. Yes. Funny how they're not putting this information out there for the general public. How come we're not hearing this on the news? You know what I mean? And the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 sparked a rush of renewable energy projects in response to tax credits and economic incentives for wind, solar, and storage. Now the crisis has reached the inflection point as the recent One Big Beautiful Bill plans to rephase out clean energy tax credits by 2027. So everybody get your shit now, right? forcing developers, regulators, and commercial actors to act fast to figure out how to get enough electricity on the grid to meet rising energy demands before it's too late. This is where I'm going. Policy reforms need to speed things up. They're calling for policy reforms to speed things up. More government control. We need more government control. And these clusters are part of it too, I guess. Well, I don't mention clusters, but they do cluster studies. Yeah, cluster. And a first ready, first served criteria, which prioritizes projects that are ready for implementation, rather than the previous first come, first served rule. Because you could sign up on that queue years in advance. I mean, Liberty Renewables signed up for their queue connection request in 2021, years before most of us people here locally even were aware that the project was being considered. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act creates new pressure. This is where we're going here too. The recent phase out key IRA incentives, which will likely lead to a surge in developers attempting to break ground on projects before the new deadline. The table below shows how 6 key tax credits will shrink or disappear under the new law. Tax credit policy, you got these different changes in here. The phase out of tax credits for projects starting construction after 2033, ends the credits for wind and solar projects placed in service after 2027 unless they begin construction within 21 months of the Big Beautiful Bill's enactment. So even more time, like this Agricola wind project, they got to begin construction within 21 months, which puts them on a push, which puts them, hey, we got to get this freaking shit through, man. We can't let these freaking NIMBYs freaking stand in our way, right? It's more than NIMBYs, man. They're crushing our republic. They're crushing our limited form of government. They're crushing our individual rights and liberty of our children and our grandchildren in perpetuity with this shit. This is what I'm trying to put out there for you to take into consideration. But there's going to be a big push to creating a log jam that if these clusters are speeding anything up whatsoever, it's not going to be anything compared to the log jam that's coming due to this. So you've got all this working against the feasibility of what these windmills are. They have no feasibility. It's a technology that is antiquated as soon as Hochul put it out there that they're going nuclear. They can't possibly produce the energy that they need. They know it, and they're going nuclear. So if you're going to go nuclear, why put all this shit why shit all these solar panels and windmills over our state, over our rural heritage, over the Finger Lakes region, which has basically been put out there? They want to make it national park status. And the Adirondacks are out there already exempt for this from these windmills. The so-called marginalized communities. They say that they're putting these these projects out there to create jobs for the marginalized communities that aren't allowed to have these windmills. It doesn't make any sense. Just they've wanted to make a national heritage area out of the whole Finger Lakes region with the rural heritage that we have, and they're shitting all these freaking industrial solar panels and windmills, these colossal freaking knives in the back of our republic that they are. It's all they are. Sticking right out of our back of our republic. And they don't need them if they're going nuclear. They don't need them. They can't possibly produce the energy that we need. So they're defunct. And the only reason to keep them going is to leave their boot print on our back. On our face, whatever, on our nuts. Step right on our nuts, right? But anyways, you got all these different phase outs, all these different things that goes right down through the list. This is the article right here from the University of Chicago to put this out. So you can check that out. But why the backlog queue connection request to begin with? Even if cluster approvals do believe that the issue is solve the issue in the short run, in the long run, they'll run up against the exponentially expanding logjam coming their way, like I just said. But why the backlog and queue connection request to begin with? For the next show, I'm going to get into that. I'm going to go into that phase. But this is going to be 2 or 3 shows. I'm not sure what. But I'm going to leave it there. We're going to cut off there. I hope you're seeing that there are arguments to be made against these colossal windmills. And they're going up all over. They're going up offshore. They're global companies. Global companies. It's a global agenda. And New York State's buying into it and funding it. They're drinking the frickin' Kool-Aid on it. They're pushing the fascism of public-private partnerships, which you would think people on the left would take into consideration. The anarchists, the Antifa, you're anti-fascist. If you're green, if you're pushing the green agenda, if you're pushing the green economy, if you're pushing renewables and shit, man, you're pushing the fascism of public-private partnerships. See it, I don't know. Right and left, we're all being shit on. Our republic is being shit on. But anyways, I hope you take that into consideration. I hope you guys are getting something out of this, and I look forward to seeing you on the next Liberty Perspective. Hope to see you on the next Liberty Perspective when I continue bringing you this information and some of the stuff that maybe we can utilize in making our defense of our republic and liberty and push back against this stuff. That's where I'm at. Thanks for stopping by the Liberty Perspective. I'm Joe Marshall, and I look forward to seeing you on the next show.